afternoon, good evening, and all other good things. Good coffee, good piece of wood. This morning's Dharma talk is Sila Paramita, or sometimes called discipline, sometimes morality. But basically, it's just watch your step. Watch your step. Lead with the awareness so that you can see if you're about to harm yourself or someone else. It's always about awareness. This is not about following rules. This is not the 10 Commandments. And if you in your life, or anytime you go to right and wrong, you're stepping on the robe of the Buddha. Don't do it. Don't go there. Have a willingness to not know what is happening, and that openness will protect you, because that is the way emptiness arises to the ego mind, to the self-centered mind, to the practitioner who is trying to follow in the footsteps, perhaps you could say, or understand the Buddha's teachings, or attain awakening or enlightenment, or all the other considerations about not being crazy, however you may talk about that. The other word is sane. You're sane. You're no longer at war with anything. Because you see, the polarity idea is just a way of that human beings down through the centuries, through many, many years, have used to manipulate others to get what they want, control others. We see that all over in our society today, about uprising against that control mentality happening. You can do this in your life. You can use these paramitas as attitudes, as principles, however you want to say it, a way of looking at things through morality, through discipline, through consideration of the basic translation of Sila Paramita is do no harm. But before you can do no harm, you have to see what the situation is in front of you. Because if you're just following the rules, this is what this looks like. There's your rule, and that's all you can see. The rule gets in the way. If the rule is just something to look at or to support you, so one of the images that sometimes is used is maybe helpful. It's kind of like training wheels. It kind of keeps you from tipping over. But you actually need to balance and understand balance, and a lot of understanding balance comes from seeing how out of balance things are. And the paranoid person, the fundamentalist person, the person who is grasping and wants control, will grasp on a rule and will even use that rule to beat you over the head, maybe mentally, because you're breaking a precept. There's no way they can know that. There's no way they can know the causes and conditions that arise as your personal karma. Meddling with you actually gets in the way of your realization. So mind your own business, unless you have permission. And even if you have permission, make sure that it isn't just a token thing where they want to be the person who's giving you permission, which I often run into as a Dharma teacher. I don't always get complete permission. And I know that, but I help them anyway, if I can. So it's the second paramita. It's also the first in the three, sometimes three trainings, three prajna principles, Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna. The second one is moved up to the first place of the last two, just before the last two, which are Samadhi or Dhyana, or concentration, sometimes called that. But it's not really a concentration on something. It is just watching what's moving. This is the way I teach it. Other people teach it differently. If this right and wrong is just beside the point. Some people need to hear it done that way. If you're listening to me, you continue to listen to me, then probably this way of talking about the Buddha's Dharma resonates with you in some way that other teachings may not. There are plenty of people who will tell you what to do. The only thing I really tell you to do, if you sit in front of me, is train your mind. Train your mind. How do you do that? Sit down and look at it. Don't believe a word I say. You can consider it. It's very easy to get wound up in ideas of right and wrong, or should I and shouldn't I, which is the fuel of that whole situation. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch that decision-making situation come up. Should I do this, or perhaps I shouldn't be doing this? Maybe this, or. But as soon as the trailer, I won't even say trailer, as soon as the kind of a supplement to your original indecisiveness comes up as right and wrong, you're clouding your own wisdom mind. Have some courage. You know what I'm saying? Have a willingness to not know what the hell's going on next. If you've been training your mind for 3 months, 3 days, 3 years, and you're sincere about this, then I'm not saying you're totally protected, but you have some kind of momentum going towards wisdom, something going towards karuna or compassion, which is not feeling for, it's feeling with. You're actually with whatever is happening. You're not separate from whatever is happening. It's interesting, as I listen to what I'm saying, I realize this is nothing at all. I had intentions of talking about this, but what is arising is because when I see you, I know what to say. When I'm in the other room, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I just was in the bathroom a little while ago, looking in the mirror, introduced myself to myself. Like, who do you think you are? What do you think came back? I don't know. If I knew I could not do this in this way, I would be doing it out of some kind of rules and laws and different things that you should be doing to make yourself more aligned with the paramita, or that which wisdom which crosses over those, the first 4 and the last 2. The first 4 are upaya, the last 2 are wisdom, if you want to break it down that way. But they also interact with each other in ways that very difficult to track in an explanation or a concept, because as soon as you start to do that, you leave the subjectivity, you leave your own personal, what you're receiving, and you go into some other person's explanation or idea about it, including mine. So the idea there is to go slow. Another word for that, for Sila Paramita, is be careful. Be careful, go slow. If there's any possibility of have the antenna out, is this going to harm? Is this going to make life difficult for that person? Or is this going to make life difficult for me, or make things worse? So being careful, kind of a simple way of talking about it. So in watching the mind's display, don't do anything unless you have to. So don't actually produce or do anything on any level, either with your hands and arms and your body and your feet, or with your chatterbox. Do anything. And in a deeper sense, in a subjective sense, of anything that arises, so far as you can. And you won't be able to do this unless you do a lot of sitting meditation, because it takes a long time to see how the mind arises out of a reaction to what is arising out of your karma. And then we react to that. We actually abandon our karma over and over and over again. You might as well be signing contracts to come back to another life and start this over again. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I have no idea what's going to happen. And I'm not concerned. When I say that, my concern is, insofar as I can, whatever breath is still left here, is to meet you where you're at and help you see who you are fundamentally. That's why I'm here. I'm not here to promote Buddhism. I'm not even here to promote meditation, but you need to train your mind. So figure that one out. The primary situation is do no harm. So if I meet someone, and not because I'm all that skillful or insightful or have some kind of a super antenna going on, but if I meet someone who's not really ready to do sitting meditation, I don't promote it to them. Everyone doesn't need to start meditating tomorrow just because you're doing that or because it's been helpful to you. Be very tentative about that. Always meet people where they're at. If you're meeting yourself where you're at on the cushion facing a wall, then when you get up off the cushion, it may not feel so good, but it will be it'll be more of a possibility that when someone comes in front of you or a situation comes in front of you, you will be at a loss. Not at a loss like the commentary of the ego. Oh, gee, I don't know what to do. This is so confusing. What should I do next? I'm not sure what this is about. If I could just get this figured out, I just knew. I just need to sit down and think about this for a while. Or maybe I should call my shrink or maybe I should call Sokuzan. Maybe he knows what to do about this. Probably not. But you do. You do. You know what this is. And what should you do? Don't do anything unless you have to. Don't do anything. And if you take that kind of approach, that doesn't mean you're running away from the burning building. That doesn't mean you're allowing someone to drown in front of you. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that everything is going to stop, or that you're going to be tongue-tied or hands tied behind your back. It means you'll be present. Unlikely that's going to show up as actual insight into the situation unless there's a lot of mind training going on. Sit down, hold still, watch the wall, watch what happens on the wall. Because what happens on the wall is what is happening in your mind stream. And to do nothing with that, whether it's coming or getting larger, getting darker, getting more smoky, getting more ominous, getting more depressive, getting more, don't do anything with that. Don't add on a validation or justification. Explain nothing. Don't explain things to yourself. It's a cover-up. It is a security blanket for ego. The seventh consciousness, that part of the mind that is paranoid and doesn't want that. That part of the mind that's paranoid and wants that. Wants more of that and less of that. You all know what I'm saying. That has to be seen, deeply. And we use concepts and we use epistemological approaches, all kinds of different ways of looking into this. What's the Sanskrit? Prapancha. We actually go in, but that is just the path. That is a structure. That is the bridge. That is the structure we go on. And Sila Paramita is part of that bridge, but it's a guardrail. It's not a rule of law, a chain around your neck that says you will only do it this way. These are not commandments. These are principles, or their ideas about the Buddha had, according to the Lotus Sutra, according to the Ashtahasrika, whatever it is, Prajnaparamita, the long sutra on the perfection of wisdom. And it shows up in other Mahayana sutras. And they show up as 6, and they show up as 10, and then later, in the 8th, 9th century, they added 4 more. We don't need that. I mean, you can use them if you want to, but let's just work with those 6. That's already a lot of conceptual stuff. Dana, giving, give. As I say, the way I teach it, give everything your attention. If you give everything your attention, you won't be able, if you really give it your attention, and you just receive whatever is showing up with no addition, no subtraction, you won't be able to help, but you won't be able to avoid helping others, because you'll see them as an aspect of your own life, a part of your own, not just your community, but deep in your consciousness. It's like the way this has been described in the past by teachers of ancient times is everyone has been your mother. It's just a way of talking about it, so you can say, see that you have a strong connection to everyone, even if it shows up as a person who's giving you a hard time, or is an enemy, or wants to, cheat you out of your inheritance or something. All the various things that come up, causes and conditions can come up. Please don't add to those. Please receive. If your karma is coming towards you, receive it. Even if it's your, we may have to die. We're gonna die. As Van Morrison said in one of his songs, you may die, you may live, you may cry. Anything, whatever arises is the case. Whatever arises is the case, not what you think about it. It's not that what you think about it couldn't have some validity. Of course, it could. But it's just a sideline to whatever's arising. Is just the sideline. We don't want to get rid of that, so we're just have blinders on. That's what that's what the laws and the rules and the relativism of the world, right and wrong, right and wrong. Is it just right? Is it wrong? Is that good? Is that bad? Stop doing that to yourself. If you're going to right it wrong, right? It's the right thing. It's the wrong thing. That's not right. This is wrong. That's good. That's not good. Please don't do that to yourself or to anyone else. This is Sila Paramita. If you think otherwise, then think otherwise. Think whatever you want to think. It's called the middle way, not too tight. This means that we include everyone. We include. If I, as a Dharma teacher, if I were starting to exclude people that didn't train their mind or didn't do what I say or didn't follow me or didn't whatever, this would not be a group, would not be happening. Have to receive on some level. And you'll notice that when you do that, the people that come into your milieu, into your mandala, into your life, into your family, into your house, into your neighborhood, have a certain kind of, there's a certain kind of resonance or ring to that you will see as a teaching. Unless you're busy correcting everybody and pointing the finger at people. Don't do it. Help people. How do you do that? Don't meddle with them. That's the biggest temptation, isn't it? We meet someone and we see that they're kind of off kilter a little bit based on our own incredibly intense insight into our true nature. Am I being sarcastic? You bet I am. I get to do that. You can do it too. You can do that. You can be sarcastic. Bring it this way. We'll see what happens. Am I asking for a war? Of course not. I don't want to fight anybody. But if you do that, I'll lose, because that's what I do. So, second paramita, there's more to go. The traditional way that goes back into the relativity of it, it's to see what to avoid and what to adopt. So that doesn't mean there's a right and wrong, but you could look at it and you could see, I'm going to continue to do this area here, but I'm going to avoid going that direction. The way I teach that in the addiction awareness approach to when people are having what they call addictions is to stay out of the bad neighborhood. Be so aware that you can see when the slightest little flutter of passion, aggression, ignorance starts to rise. There's a leading edge of that. It's like seeing the fire coming out of the dragon's mouth. You haven't seen the dragon yet, but you can see the fire. I highly recommend that you slow down. The dragon will go right past you. The dragon is looking for energy. It's looking for difficulty. It's looking for stress. It's looking for pain. It's looking for suffering. Just like we were talking about yesterday, these deeper dimensions of consciousness. There's negative energy everywhere. Sometimes it shows up as a person, sometimes as a dictator, sometimes as jailers, sometimes as apparent saints, really good people that want to help you. Don't trust anybody. Don't trust me. Believe a word I say. Consider it. Consider it. Don't buy it, don't sell it. That dragon will go right past you because a dragon, just like your wisdom mind in order to train it, you have to watch what moves. So you watch what moves, so not moves. The dragon is looking for movement too, so it can burn you. You can't actually be silent. You can't actually be still, but you can watch movement. If you watch what moves, adding, subtracting, dividing, right, or anything, then it is an opening for you, depending on the karma that arises as your belligerence or your self-centeredness or your narcissism or your self-promotion, depending on how that's functioning in your particular lifetime, along with your awareness practice. That stillness, that silence is still a contrast. The actual stillness and the actual silence is nothing at all. It's not shunyata. It's beyond that. Shunyata is a teaching, not a conclusion, even though some schools think it's a conclusion. So I guess I've said enough. If you have questions, I'd be happy to respond to them.
Shoto bowing.
Don't be afraid.
When
I
you
won't bite you. I might burn you, but I won't bite you.
When you talk about the paramitas, sometimes you use the word attitude, like it's an attitude.
I can't hear. Okay, say that again, would you, please?
Shoto bowing, can you hear me?
I can now. We were turned down.
Okay. You'll use the word attitude sometimes when you talk about the paramitas, like their attitudes to take.
Yes.
How can we use that to train the awareness and not just strengthen the conceptual structures that we put in place?
The attitude is do no harm. Don't harm anything. Either this way, don't harm yourself, and don't harm others. You could start with yourself. Don't harm yourself. So whatever's moving, which is generally speaking, unless we're sitting still on the cushion, and then it's just the thoughts and the emotions and the memories and the churning of the self-centered mind, which just keeps throwing things up. If you're moving, if you get up off the cushion and start to move there, be very suspicious of everything you're doing. When I say be suspicious, I don't mean like paranoid, but I'm just saying watch what you're doing. Watch what, like I'm watching my hand move. And look at what arises as some kind of belief or opinion or idea about other people based on your own projections, your ideas, your beliefs, your opinions, your judgments of others. Your judgments of others are quite often they're judgments of yourself that you don't want to think about, so you project those feelings on others. Sometimes if you're really angry at somebody, instead of realizing those are your feelings, somebody else might have, cocked their head or done like this or done whatever and triggered it, but they're your feelings. When I say yours, I don't mean ego. I mean this particular structure of passion, aggression, ignorance, nerve endings, and so on that appears like a separate being. There still is that separation. Be responsible. Be responsible. And if you do that, then any kind of rule that comes up or any kind of guideline is the ego mind will just, it's looking for a reference point and it needs wrong. That they're wrong. They're wrong. Or I'm right. I'm correct about this. If you're doing that, it's the very nature of warfare and of passion, aggression, and ignorance. This is what we're training ourselves to see clearly. If you see clearly, that energy can't get a rolling start. It can't get any momentum. It may come up and it may catch in your throat and you may feel angry, but the minute you bring out that finger out of its holster and go like this, even if it's even if the person did say, I think you're full of it, or I don't, or any kind of thing, whatever's arising, because you don't know if that's actually that person doing that, if it's because your feeling about them is so intense that you're projecting onto them. You all know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying I'm not accusing you of anything. The judgments of others is a judgment. You don't want to judge yourself. So you can't really be genuine as long as you're spitting fire out at others. The only way you can be genuine is to stop doing that. And then the karma that arose with this body, speech, mind combination, we call this living being, any karma that was generated in the 3rd century or 3 weeks ago is yours, and it's coming up. And you cannot find the source of that, but you can find the leading edge of it. Just watch your mind. It'll take you into all kinds of different directions. This is why we sit down, hold still, and watch what moves so that we can get better and better. I want to call it progress. It won't feel like that. At seeing what is actually happening, at seeing what is actually moving, at seeing the nature of the 7th consciousness, of the klesha mind. The klesha mind is very hard to see. It's difficult because we get wound up in the 6th consciousness and think is that the I we're talking about? No. Yeah, that's the relative I. I'm going to the store. I'm going to get have a dish of oatmeal. I'm going to go out and look at the trees, or I'm going to go for a walk. Me. That's sick consciousness. That's why it's so difficult to deal with that situation, because, well, I am somebody. I'm here. What's the big deal? What is this egolessness about? What is that all about? Will I feel like there's nobody here? No, it may be more intense. It may be more intense. So what's different about it? Not real. The image I quite often use is a Stephen King movie. It's really, really intense, but it's not real. It's a movie. It's unreal.
Shoto bowing.
Yeah.
When I relate to something like do not harm, it immediately invites like a spinning process where I start to evaluate what I'm going to do before I do it. Is there a way to relate to that more directly?
Yes, there is. You're actually doing it. It's just that you think you're missing something, and you're actually watching the spinning process, or you wouldn't be able to ask that question. You're watching that. So there's some of the awareness might be going into feeling the evaluation, but it's like you already see that. So there's some kind of a tether, or some kind of retracting that or pulling it back. Don't yank it back, because then it gets covered up and it continues to go in another direction. I'm sure you're aware of that. Just watch that. Just be willing to be genuine. Be willing to have that kind of irritating feeling that you're criticizing people. Don't get rid of that. It is not about being someone else. It's about being genuine, and that can be embarrassing, because we would like to be a nicer, kinder, sweeter, more understanding being. I'm sure you notice how difficult that is to conclude. More about that, if you have it, that's a good area to talk.
Shoto bowing. So are these paramitas more about showing those discursive areas more than lessening that?
So the whole idea, it depends on where you're at. So lessening could happen as long as it's not an agenda. If it becomes an agenda, then we're right back to spiritual materialism again. That's why it's difficult, because the self-centeredness wants something else. It wants, even if it wants enlightenment, that's still spiritual materialism. It's not that we don't want to be sane, that we don't want to understand, but our way of going about it, if it is run by the self-centeredness, you'll notice there's an inability, or at least temporarily, an inability to really include others. You all have, this doesn't mean that if somebody's abusing you, you've got to include them. The way to include them is to include what they're doing and get away from them. But if somebody is somewhat reasonable and they just happen to disagree with you, then you could have a conversation with them about it. But the conversation with them about it doesn't mean that you get to blame them for how you feel. More about that if you haven't.
Not right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin bowing.
Yes, Kevin.
I have Sultram in my Dharma name, which is discipline. And I feel I always think of it in terms of like work harder, or fix your posture, or show up on time. And is that just a complete misunderstanding? Bowing.
I don't think it's a complete misunderstanding. I think it's a partial understanding. Some of that shows up there. Be on time, be respectful of others if they're expecting you. If you've made a commitment to through your vow, refuge vow, bodhisattva vow, whatever you have to train your mind, then try to do some of that. But don't make it a credential-oriented thing where you do it and then you check, and you have a bunch of credentials around it. So the idea is to be aware of that, so that you find out for yourself what that means for you. But it's an attitude. It's here so that we can discipline, as it's here isn't about following rules, but it's about using some kind of a guideline. And then some people may fall in different parts of that. Some people may be may line up with other paramitas. The next one is patience. The next one after that is energy. And so they show up differently, and they overlap, and everything. But I think the more you, Kevin, can just, or Sultram, I should say, can just look at what's happening and just receive that in the form of the lack of balance that's there. So this way, you, instead of going in with hammer and tong and trying to push things around, just be aware of that. When I say balance, maybe not training your mind or not getting to a form that you've agreed to practice. And as far as you personally interrupting other people's meddling with other people, I don't think that's something you particularly have an issue with. You seem to distance with people, but then I don't know what it's like to be one of your cats. So you might be kind of a dictator.
I'm always trying to brush their teeth, and they hate it.
Oh, I know. Yes, I can imagine they would.
Kevin Bowing, what is the relationship between this sort of relative discipline of precision and showing up on time and tidying your room and doing no harm? Bowing.
If you could be more specific, I mean, I understand your question, but it would be so much different for different people. That whole area is, but what people want is some kind of a structure so they can actually, apply that so they don't have to be open. I think it's a matter of being so open that you can see, you're sensitive of what you're feeling, what's happening with you, and what other people is going on, what is happening with them, and you endeavor to meet people where they're at. So that's going to show up differently each time. You're not going to be able to have some kind of rule to turn to and say, well, do no harm. You may not know whether you're creating more conflict for someone or for yourself, for that matter. But this is why I say less is better, and more observing what's happening rather than joining in with what is happening. And that, of course, that comes up with the next paramita, as patience, as allow things to show up, rather than my dentist isn't on time. Get irritated by, or somebody's not showing up at the form. You're there, and someone's supposed to be there to be the chant leader or something, whatever it may be, and they're not there on time. Immediately, people tend to immediately go into some kind of criticism of that person, especially if it's somebody that seems to be late a lot. You don't know what it's like to be them. You have no idea what it's like to be a person that has difficulty with areas that maybe you don't have difficulties with. I mean, you seem to work with that area. That yours is another issue. So about being considerate and I don't know. Simply put, it's just acting appropriately. And what do I mean by that? It's like you're so much in the situation and you have so little prejudgment about anything, how things should be, even though there are forms, or observing the form rather than grasping them and manipulating others, or manipulating your own mind with how you can't live up to something. And it becomes circular. Then the next passion, aggression, and ignorance. As soon as you get aggressive with your mind, then it goes into passion, which explains why you get to screw things up. And then it goes into ignorance, which allows you to screw things up again because of the lack of awareness, and then become angry about it. Passion, aggression, ignorance, passion, aggression. It usually is working in that way, as metaphors, or a way of understanding how those kind of pushing, pulling, and shutting down energies work in a circular fashion. So it makes it harder to do anything about it. It might be better to just stay angry. Don't try to get rid of anger. It's when I say be genuine, when Rinpoche would say be genuine, it's like you have to be with whatever's happening so you can have a deep, deep understanding of what that is. Otherwise, you think there's someone who's angry and someone who needs to get rid of the anger. And what better way to get rid of anger than just to blame somebody? There's always going to be somebody that will be an easy target, usually someone you're close to in some way. not blaming you for anything. I'm just saying that it's your fault.
How does uh, observing form, which to me implies limiting space or containing space, how does that help us to open up?
Because by observing a form, in other words, the form would be, say, a block set. You come in, 7 o'clock, you sit down, whether you're doing it with a group, Sangha, or you're doing it on your own, you sit down and you set up the form. You know there's going to be a 4-hour period, according to your clock or whatever, where you're not going to do much. You're going to sit there. And then by observing that, and the way we observe it with our body is to sit down and hold still. But body mind are not two separate things. They just tend to separate so that we can protect ourselves against things we don't want, and we can get to things that we want or desire or cling to. And so the idea is just to bring yourself into that form, sit down and watch the spaciousness that things that shows up when you just watch what moves. If you're just watching the movement and you don't add anything to the movement, like I can't watch that. Or you don't add anything to the movement, like I need to have more of that feeling. You don't do anything with that, but watch the movement. If you watch the movement, then the spaciousness starts to become apparent. That's threatening to ego. The ego doesn't want an open dimension. It would rather be bored and shut down. It actually prefers boredom to an open dimension where there's no entertainment. If more about that, Kevin, if you haven't.
Trungpa Rinpoche had said that boredom can be an indication of progress in meditation.
Yes.
But I'm interested in this idea that ego prefers boredom to no entertainment. So what is the difference between that kind of boredom and no entertainment? Because
the boredom is also an indicator you're giving up on entertainment. So it's a subtle credential. So that's subtle. It's not, there's nothing wrong with seeing that being bored and not particular, like a Rinpoche used to use his images, cool boredom. You know, it's cool. It's kind of even somewhat luxurious. You're just kind of hanging out there, not having anything particular happen. That's that lasts for a while. But it will extend itself if you kind of fuel that situation so that you can continue to return to that conclusion state of now I'm finally giving up on entertainment. So, yeah, more about that, or does that help a little bit?
Yes, thank you. In another talk, I'd heard you refer to discipline as not wanting anything else. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, probably. Yes.
So how does not wanting anything else also show up as not doing harm?
No. I think that there's just less activity happening, so therefore other people's movements are coming and going, and their vulnerability is more apparent to you. Other people, since you're no longer particularly concerned about nurturing your own self-centeredness, getting what you want, including enlightenment, including understanding, including clarity. The whole grasping thing is starting to settle down, and because of that openness, you begin to see the not only the tenderness of your own dynamic, but that of others, and see that people are very, very vulnerable, are very sensitive. And even people who are very sensitive, you begin to see that in people who are completely shut down, and they may even be aggressive. They're so sensitive that the only thing they know to do is to cover it with aggression, because they're terrified of it. So that's when just a natural respect or equilibrium shows up with your relationship to others. You see so clearly what's happening with yourself, and you're no longer at war with yourself. Intense negativity can arise in your mind stream, and you're not threatened by it. You're not put off by it, because you're beginning to see deeply that there is no one there. There's no solid being there. The fear can do whatever it wants. The fear may arise. You will still feel it. You can still feel jealousy. You can still feel fear. You can feel anything, boredom, anything can show up, but it doesn't find an idea to second emotion or to be the one experiencing that. So therefore, it can't find a, it's like a hat with no hat rack. So it's just floating around in space, and it's there. You feel it. So the same thing is happening with the other person. We're not as separate as we look. Our bodies tend to make us look very separate, and our being born and dying at different times, and having different kinds of karma, different colors of the rainbow. But we're fundamentally not separate, and that's threatening to the self-centeredness of the ego that wants something else, wants control, or that just wants to be disciplined, or that wants to be a perfect moralistic person. And sometimes people, if they want that a lot, they'll go into some kind of a relativism or some kind of fundamentalism where right and wrong, and they'll clamp down on the right, or they'll go the other direction because they can't seem to do it. Then they'll just just say, hell with it. I'm going to just do whatever I want to do. It's like people who, in our society, who are disrespectful of other people's health and use I just got to be an American or some crazy, insane idea. This is insanity everywhere. That can go any direction with any group, and it will. It will be difficult. Very hard to get to go and talk to somebody who is making a big disturbance or really, really making life difficult for lots and lots of people, and suggest that they train their mind. So, but what we can do is we can train our minds. We can train ours. If I sometimes say, somebody wants my help, I have to have their permission. I'm not promoting anything. Unless you're sitting here, then I'm promoting train your mind. Find out who you are. Don't get your identity from anything but your own awareness. See if there is someone. See if you are this body. Maybe so, maybe not. Have a few minutes left if there's other questions.
Jeez, I'm bowing. What is harm?
Well, I think it can show up lots of different ways. Is to do something to yourself or with yourself that makes that might temporarily make things feel better on the nerve ending area, but in the long term or bigger picture of the whole thing could be painful or disruptive or make things more difficult. If we're just going with our initial grasping and not seeing that clearly is harm. Not understanding the Four Noble Truths in a deep kind of way where you've actually somewhat made that your own. And just, I think you're asking me in a fundamental way that, not just because I know you already know what that is. But you're asking me in a way that I'm just saying, just find out who you are. Find out what this is, who this person is, and then you'll know you can't step into someone. It's the boundaries are, they're not only training wheels, the boundaries are natural boundaries between ourselves and someone else. Until that person, you could say, gives you permission, mind your own business. And if they give you permission, then always be very careful that you're not overstepping any bounds. And how do you do that? By seeing the boundary. The boundary is not a fence, or not a wall, and it's fluctuating all the time. If it's a relative situation.
Geez, I'm bowing. How is harm different from emotional difficulty? Bowing.
Well, there's a lot of area for interpretation there. There's some specific area. Your emotional difficulty could be anything from I'm really depressed to I'm really sorry about I'm losing my relationship, or I have no idea what is going on, or I feel lost, or I can't make up my mind about something, so therefore there's emotional difficulty. Or I can't stop projecting my emotions and feelings on somebody else, even though I know intellectually it's not true, but lock and load, I'm coming after you. I can't help it, sorry. I'm going to have to stab you or hurt you or swear at you or accuse you. It's difficult. Specific about the question, and I'll see what I can do with it if you have it.
Choose unbounding. The two areas that are showing up are like causing someone else emotional difficulty by not participating, and if that's harm, and then like I think similarly not participating and that causing emotional difficulty for myself are, if emotional difficulty is showing up, am I causing harm? Sorry.
No, no, not necessarily. And you know, you're living in a monastery, so your protocols or cultural protocols are much different than everybody else's. You're living in a monastery. You're in an area where people are trying to train their minds to be sane. Much different than out in other areas of family and friends and relationships, neighborhoods. And of course, in this COVID-19 area, all that's modified also. You don't other than relating to the forms in the monastery, you need to relate to the forms, you need to observe the forms. And that observing forms may be you call up and say, I don't feel good this morning, I'm staying in bed. As long as communication, cooperation. As long as you're doing that with others in the monastery, then the community tends to function, and the Sangha tends to function through that. But you don't owe anybody anything to show up as them feeling sad because you're not in there meditating. I'm not sure, or you didn't attend some kind of a celebration, or if somebody's having a birthday party and you don't show up, if that's the kind of thing you're talking about, I don't know, that would be up to you. But it's not wrong if you just don't want to be sociable. If that's what you're saying, that's your business. If it's the form in the monastery, then you might have to look more closely at what it is you're not including yourself in. Or can you say more about it, or I could possibly respond in a different way if I'm missing the point altogether.
Geez, I'm not sure. I'm still asking the same question, but it is that area, like a birthday party kind of thing, where I feel like if I go, I'll end up getting triggered and feel like shit. But if I don't go, then I'll feel like I'm excluding myself and I'll feel like shit. And so it just doesn't seem like there's an area where.
Aren't you a Gemini?
Yes.
Well, there you go. Just send your better half to the party. Send the nicest of the two evil twins. So, not to make fun of your situation, I understand what you're saying, and the right or wrong area about it can be difficult. But I think some of that is the kind of socializing that sometimes goes on just isn't that comfortable, especially if you or anyone here is going through a particular kind of emotional passage where you just need to be by yourself. And so we don't have to show up just for other people's benefit. What you could do is, as you say, as I say, communication, cooperation, collaboration. Those 3 C's are really important. And starting with the first one, you could actually talk to the person you think is going to be offended. You could say, I'm just not up for doing this tonight. I'm not up for it, but I'll apologize to you. Or you could say something like that. It depends on who they are. Or if someone's really upset with you, I think communication goes a long ways. Doesn't mean you have to justify what you're doing, but you could at least talk a little bit about it. And especially if they're expecting you and you're just not going to show up, that might be more difficult just because you're embarrassed about talking to them, or you feel you're so sensitive you can't even put them first for 5 minutes. You don't have to come to their party, but you could come over and talk to them and say, I'm not going to be able to make it because I'm just not feeling up to it right now. Chances are they're going to understand. But if you don't show up at all and you just don't come, here again, am I missing what you're asking me about, or should I just shut up?
Geez, I'm bowing. No, that's helpful. Thank you. Bye.
Certainly. Any other questions?
Jessica bowing.
Go ahead.
Is causing suffering doing harm, bowing?
Well, that's a pretty open thing, and I would say don't cause suffering. That's harmful, so don't do it.
Jessica bowing. So if you're in a situation where somebody is doing harm or causing suffering, but they're so shut down that trying to communicate with them causes them suffering or just is really difficult for them, how do you navigate that? How do you work with that, bowing?
The very best thing is less is better. Don't do anything unless you have to. And what you could, it depends on, if it's, if it's your spouse or if it's your daughter, your mother, your father, your next door neighbor, and all the different things it could be. Those are all variable, and that's very situational. But generally, I would say, and specifically even, I would say don't do anything with it. Anything that, if they're upset about something, just, you could say, sorry you're having a difficult time, sorry. Do not solve it for them. Do not blame them. Allow them the space to be upset or crazy or spinning around or pointing their finger at you. Allow them, receive that. A lot of people are dealing with this kind of thing where somebody else is causing a problem. And invariably, what I'll say to anyone who has a mind training practice going on, where they're actually spending time, other people might not say this, but to anyone who's doing that, I say, just receive. I don't care. I mean, if you're receiving flowers or bullets, it's receiving. I don't know how else to say it. I'm sorry to give you such disappointing information, but this is the first words out of the Buddha's mouth is life is suffering, and that suffering can manifest in so many different ways. So the very best thing you might be able to do for somebody, depending on the situation, is to, they say something, then watch your body language, watch their body language. People are saying a lot more, not concepts. They're saying a lot more with their body language than they are necessarily with the words coming out of their mouth. And it is not about understanding that means they're shut down. This means they're not paying attention. Don't abandon what you see for something else, because what you see is as Marshall McLuhan said in the 1950s, the medium is the message. The medium, the body is the message. I'm not saying that people aren't brilliant and have great concepts and are able to think things out and analyze everything, but it's circular. It looks like success while it's happening. But then 3 hours later, you feel like crap and you don't know why. So you got to figure it out. Not just saying you, Jessica, but I'm saying any of us, me, any of us. If you get into some kind of elaboration about how can I, what are they, should I, shouldn't I, get where it's at. And that may not feel so good. In other words, you're receiving their negativity. This is a natural way of doing Tonglen. I don't teach Tonglen as an artificial structure of using the breath to send and receive. I think you should just do it with your life. Doing it that other way is opens us up to deeper dimensions that are dangerous, sometimes called spirits. Please don't believe a word I'm saying. You don't have to believe in anything. I'm just saying, from working with people and my own mind and other people's minds for a long time, I'm saying there are many, many levels of this that not all of us can see, but we should have respect for people. Any further questions? Jisho, you had a question? Jisho, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm a little confused about be genuine. So in the case of somebody, I don't know who was talking about it, Kevin perhaps, somebody coming late for a meeting.
Yeah.
At that time, I'm aware that they're late. I'm aware that I'm getting angry, but I am angry at that time. So to me, be genuine means to be the anger, whether it is shouting at them or whether it is showing it in some way or whatever. That's what it means to me. Somehow I get the impression that that's not what you're suggesting. So that's my confusion.
Okay, thank you for the question. I appreciate the question. So this is why you can't have a rule. You can't have, all you can have is an attitude of, I want to be as respectful, and I want to be as careful as I can. I want to have an attitude of being helpful or not hindering. But that goes both directions. So there may be a time, just because of the causes and conditions, where you may come out and shout at them. You say, what are you doing? I've been sitting here waiting for you for 15 minutes. Where the difficulty comes in is if you do that, and then you add on some kind of a guilt about it, or if you add on the other aspect of guilt is explanation, or you just shut down on it and just pretend you never did that. These are the three poisons. But if you do that, if you're genuinely sincere, then it's actually shows up more as generosity. It depends on the person on the other end of your whatever, tirade or being upset or your expression. So by not setting up a standard there are times when you might do that, and other times when you notice because of the causes and conditions that are usually blocked out because we want our way, we might even want our way to not react. No, I'm just not going to react. I'll just act like I'm not mad. I'll just try not to be mad. It doesn't work. And so I would say, be kind to yourself and realize that some people, 3 people coming in at different times, this one person, you can actually get upset with them. That you have a good connection with them, you love them, you care about them, and you can say, look, you can't do this, you can't show up late. Whereas someone else might come and say, you wouldn't necessarily do some passive aggressive thing like look at your watch, but you might say something about it later. You might wait till you cool off a little bit and say, I need to approach them a little bit differently because their dynamic is different. So this is about being genuine. In other words, you're willing to be in this situation with no rules, no guidelines, other than the attitude of what? Dana, generosity, the attitude of what? Sila, morality or discipline, or an understanding that the form, here's a person who is having difficulty with the form that you both agreed on, and rather than going after them, instead you're going to talk to them later about it, or you're going to remind them, say, you might even say, can I send you a reminder next time? And then the other person, because of this specific situation, because it's very situational, this other situation, you might actually go in and bark at them. But right and wrong is extra. Don't continue, if I'm saying for you or for anyone, if you genuine, maybe barking at them. I do that myself. So, and I've been practicing a long time, but I don't have control of anything. Discipline is a misunderstanding if you think it's about controlling yourself. Get too close to me and I'll smack you one. And what do I mean by that? And I'm not going to hit you. I'm saying that I don't function out of some kind of rule about how I'm supposed to treat people. That's why it's dangerous to get around somebody who functions in the way I do. And I'm not the only one. Might not be many of us out there, but there's some not concerned with living up to any kind of standard. I don't know how else to say it than that. But in other words, Chisho, just allow it to go back and forth. There may be times when you bark, and maybe times when because you're really aware of your emotions and you're not trying to justify them, you just feel as if you have a perfect right to be irritated with somebody when they don't live up to their commitment. It makes it very hard if somebody's constantly missing their appointments or something like that. So I think it depends situationally, it depends on who it is, what your energy level is with them, what your communication, if they are a practitioner, that helps. If they're not a practitioner, that makes it a lot more difficult to deal with them. The best thing is just don't set up appointments with them. Anything further, Chisho? Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, Chishabang. Yeah, thanks, Sokuzan. That does help. I mean, our behavior might be different depending on what shows up at that point in time. Just to be comfortable with that, or just be with it, is the way I take your.
I think that's pretty good. Yeah, I think it has to come out of your awareness, not out of me saying something about it. You should or you shouldn't. There's too much of that going on. Right and wrong is just in the relativism of the whole thing. It's like war and peace. It's just has its, we'd rather be at peace than at war. But if you have a setup there, you create the dichotomy, you create the teeter-totter that's going to go like this, and same with anything. Have any other questions, or should we stop?
I have no questions.
You do? Okay. Okay, I think we're good. We'll go ahead and close then. We'll dedicate the merit. Thank you so much.
At the monastery.
At the monastery, we're going to dedicate the merit. Okay.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Ji Ho San Shi Shi Hu Shi Son Bu Sa Mo Ko Sa Mo Ko Ja the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita. O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect SokukoJi Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.